I'm like genuinely 100% surprised that I'm even talking about this right now, because when it was first announced, I immediately wrote it off. But the Castlevania Netflix series is something. I really think that it's a promising start to a cool new series that actually might be the first really good video game adaptation. I know it's not a movie, but it's still the closest thing we've gotten so far. Now let me back up a sec. I don't want to be unfair. We have had some pretty close gets. I mean, the Warcraft movie I didn't think was terrible. Meanwhile, we had stuff like Max Payne, which like ruined one of my favorite games. And we had the Prince of Persia movie, which was a nice try. It had a decent budget and good actors, but it was ultimately just kind of... And then most recently we had the Assassin's Creed movie, which I thought was like almost there, but not quite. I think it took itself a little too seriously. But here with this Castlevania Netflix series, I think it really found a great middle ground. Now the interesting thing though is, of course, it's taking from Castlevania, which the early Castlevania games were more gameplay, exploration, puzzle, and combat based than actual story. So they did take a lot of liberties here, but what I'm trying to figure out what exactly made it so special, because other video game adaptations have done what this did. It took a game and then kind of made its own thing out of it, kind of respective of the property. And that's exactly what Castlevania has done here, but they nailed it. And I think what it really comes down to is that it's respectful, and it understood the cooler aspects, the darker aspects, the creepier aspects, the stuff that really did work with Castlevania, especially some of the stuff that you used your brain and your imagination to fill in the blanks with, especially with stuff like Symphony of the Night, and most notably Castlevania 3, which is seemingly what this is based off of the most, because here you get Trevor Belmont of the Belmont clan, and I really love him as a character, although he seems like he's at the start of an arc. Sometimes he seems kind of like an ass, and I don't really know where they're gonna go with it. But he's voiced by the guy who did Thor and Oakenshield from The Hobbit, and I think he did a really good job. This was really good voice acting. While it's a little too mumbly sometimes, I think it's great because he's badass and gritty and but there's also some levity to him, you know, like getting in drunken bar fights and stuff, and I think that's kind of indicative of the rest of this series, because there are moments of levity in a series that is really, really dark. It's dark from the way it looks, but it's also incredibly gory. There's lots of foul language, which I will say, when they drop some fucks here and there, I thought it was a little distracting given the time period, but otherwise it worked. But the gore and the violence and people getting ripped apart by demons, and even like, I think they showed kids getting killed and stuff. It really goes all out in a good and grim and dark way without totally taking itself way too seriously, which I am a fan of. Starting off though with the first episode, which I think knocked it out of the park, and I think if you watch the first episode, that will be the one that hooks you, because the first episode takes the entire time just establishing the main villain of Castlevania, Dracula, and his motivations, and here they set him up as a sympathetic villain, and I love it. I think it's perfect the way they set it up. Dracula found love in a human wife. She is then burned at the stake because she is a witch by the local church of Wallachia, and it turns into this whole big thing where he just wants to kill humanity. He's fueled by vengeance and just straight up petty anger, basically. But it really works, and it makes him a very scary, powerful force, and a Dracula that not only deals with supernatural stuff, but also technology and science and wisdom, which is interesting. And I think they could really have something going for it there, and I really want to see them keep going with that, because they introduce Alucard, one of the fan favorites of the series, I guess I would say, and he's got an interesting dynamic because he is the son of Dracula. We don't know where it goes yet, but I think it could be interesting, because the other side of things, the other plot, which is what this series of episodes focus on, is the church and the corruption of the church, and how it's kind of corrupted the church to just do evil things, with evil ulterior motives, and how religion can drive some people too far, I guess. And it pretty much works, even though it makes the church and the clergy pretty much one-note villains compared to Dracula, who seemed to have way more complexities going on. It's still an interesting look, and they ask a lot of questions. They open up a lot of like church and state and religion versus humanity and like all these different things, which I don't see, it doesn't seem like the show is prepared to address it too far, other than just some vague touchings and some show and not really tell. But they did a good job like adapting Castlevania and building upon with this lore here, like with Wallachia, the regions around it, and the church, the clergymen of the church, the speakers, the sort of monks who carry their history only through spoken word, and the fact that it kind of ends up with a band of three, almost like a classic medieval RPG. You have the speaker girl who has mage powers, you have Trevor who is like a knight, which with his whip, and a couple scenes they gave him with action. That whip is badass. It's plopping people's eyes out. It's chopping people's fingers off. I love it. And then we have Alucard, who shows up right at the end, and he's just a badass vampire with a really long sword. There's a really good battle between them, and I like what they have going here, man. I just gotta say, it sucks so bad that it was only 4 episodes. That was probably, obviously, that's the weakest thing about this whole series. That's a total bummer. But I guess at least Netflix did confirm that they are renewing it for a second season, which will have 8 episodes. But here, 4 episodes, each at 20 minutes long, it wasn't enough. It felt like just a tease. Honestly, that could have been 1 hour-long thing, and I would have been a bit happier instead of this actually being released as a season 1. It felt a little kind of like, what? No. But as someone who hasn't really played every single Castlevania, but I really liked 2, Simon's Quest is okay, but 3 is really solid. Symphony of the Night, which I admit I never finished, but I did really like it. The Nintendo 64 one, which was awesome, and the PlayStation 2 and DS titles were really good games that I was totally hooked on. Not to mention the newer ones, Lords of Shadow, which were a little derivative, but I really enjoyed them, and I think it's very interesting here what Castlevania Netflix cherry-picked from each of the games, and really more of the atmosphere and the aesthetic than anything, which is I think what some people just really like about Castlevania, and I think they nailed it. I really, really want to see more. I love being excited to get more of a thing, and we're gonna get more, so, I mean, props to Castlevania. I think it also helps that the people behind it really give a shit. You have Warren Ellis as the writer, who is extremely talented, but you also have Andy Shankar, who is the guy behind that Punisher short and that Power Ranger short, those online shorts that were really, really good, and I think it's promising. With the fact that Netflix is kind of scooping up video game properties in the attempts to make them into things, I think this is a really good start, and for once, I'm actually excited about watching a video game thing, you know? I mean, I know it's a show, but this could be great for movies down the line, too. This could be a proven method, so I'm pumped. But briefly, before we wrap up, this episode is brought to you by Neil Blomkamp. Yes, really! Neil Blomkamp, for those of you that don't know, the mind behind District 9 and Elysium and some others, has opened Oats Studios. This is a new indie endeavor by him. They've been releasing online shorts recently, all kind of sci-fi and horror themed. And most notably, Zygote is the newest one. Look, I don't really take a lot of sponsors on this channel because I like to talk about stuff that I'm genuinely into, and I think Zygote is pretty satisfying. If you're into horror, gore, sci-fi, and maybe the game Inside, if you played to the end, you know what I'm talking about, I think you're gonna find a lot to like here. I definitely recommend it. It's a short film. It's only like 20 minutes long. I linked it in the description below if you're curious. But the Castlevania Netflix series does give me hope. It gives me hope for the ongoing Castlevania series, which is kind of better than anything Konami's done anytime recently. But not only that, just other Netflix video game properties, and hopefully maybe video game movies. Maybe people will pay attention to Netflix and how they're doing it, and movie producers will do the same. I don't know. That might be wishful thinking, honestly. But these videos are me rambling, but also a conversation with you, so I do want to know what you're thinking. Chances are you've probably seen it. It's short. There's not really too much to it, so you should hop on it and watch it. If you don't have Netflix, you can probably find a way to watch it. Let's be real. But I do want to know what you're thinking. If you are a hardcore crazy 100% Castlevania fan, you've played every single one top to bottom, I want to hear from you. If you're like me, you're kind of in the middle, you've played a good majority of them, and you're into them, but you're not like diehard over them, what are you thinking? And I also definitely want to hear from you guys who haven't played a single Castlevania game, but like games, maybe you watched it, maybe you're into it. I definitely want to know what you think, because I think it's good. I think it's violent, it's satisfying, it's funny, it's creepy and scary. It's a little bit of everything, and I can't wait to see more. So let's talk about that stuff. You guys know the deal. Thanks for watching me ramble here. Clicking the like button does help me out, but I'm Jake Baldino, and you can subscribe because video games.